guest here at COP29 in Baku in Azerbaijan on the Caspian Sea. It's Diana Urge-Vorsatz, and she's vice chair of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and it's a great pleasure to see her. You're the chair of the Scientific Committee for the upcoming IPCC report on climate change and cities. Why are you producing this report?
First of all, thank you very much for having me. It's a privilege. This is an especially important report because cities generate over 70% of emissions globally, even though in terms of population, we have roughly half of global population living there. But also, cities are extremely important because that's where over 80% of global GDP is being produced. That's where a lot of the innovations are happening. That's where a lot of change is happening fast. Also, that's where the majority of people are exposed to the impacts of climate change, because cities can even aggravate the different impact, or at least concentrate the different impacts of climate change. So that's really an area where we can best address climate change, both in terms of the impacts, vulnerability and adaptation, as well as greenhouse gas emission reductions.
So, as you're saying, they're big producers of greenhouse gas emissions, the cities. And what do you envision is going to be some of the key elements of what we might term a net zero city?
So the IPCC has already had urban chapters in several of our previous reports. In the sixth assessment report, we identified 3 key strategies in order to get also to net zero, and in general for cities to reduce their emissions significantly as compared to baseline. Because of course, in developing country cities, the first goal is just to move away from big growth of emissions and first just reduce that, and later on we can get to net zero. So the 3 strategies, the first one is to reduce energy and material demand while providing the same or even better services to the people and even more well-being. Second, once we reduce that, of course not time-wise, but just strategy-wise, then supply the remaining material and energy needs by zero-carbon energy sources and fuels. Mostly that means electrification in cities, so we see most of the cities electrifying and supplying more and more of the needs by clean, first of all, electricity, and then gradually that electricity and the other fuels that are coming to the cities are becoming decarbonized. And the third strategy is to take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and capture it in cities. So that is the area where we see a lot of new developments, so carbon dioxide removal. But already we documented in the sixth assessment report that, for example, urban trees are already removing 7 gigatons, so that's a lot of carbon dioxide, 7 gigatons of carbon dioxide, and every year they are capturing further 400 million tons of carbon dioxide. So getting nature back into our cities will not only capture more of the emissions, but also make our cities more livable, and also these help more with adaptation efforts through the reduction of the urban heat islands.
Urban areas are very different, aren't they, in different places? If you look at, say, a Nordic city like Stockholm versus, say, a developing country city in, say, I don't know, the Central African Republic, for example, or Dakar, or Nairobi, Kenya. So they're all very, very different indeed. Is it possible then to take the assessment in a way that takes into account these different points in development of so many different cities in the world?
That's a really excellent question that really captures the challenges for our special report in cities. So what we have done in the sixth assessment report, we have identified 3 key typologies. So first of all, the already established cities, and then the next was the rapidly urbanizing cities, and the third one, which are the emerging cities. So these 3 categories. But even these 3 are very diverse within themselves. So what this city's special report is going to do is we have a special chapter on typologies, or that means the different types of cities, how cities differ, and we hope that within a chapter we are going to be able to distinguish the solutions for different along different axes, meaning not only development level, but also geography, culture, and local climate, and different types of issues which matter to decision makers that distinguish cities for different decision-making communities. So certainly the report has a very strong aim at trying to break down the one-size-fits-all to several different packages of messages. And we are going to, one of the tools what we are going to use for that is to use case studies, so galleries of case studies, and see how cities have already been succeeding in addressing some of these challenges. Since this report is going to be very solution-oriented and very relevant for urban action, which also is facilitated by government and multilateral action. So we really need to address all the multiple levels of governance, but certainly we need to want to be very relevant to all these different decision makers, and hopefully really focus on how they can put these actions into place and what is available for them.
We're essentially living in a world that's fast approaching 1.5 degrees centigrade, which is often termed by many people as the safety limit, in a sense, under the Paris Climate Change Agreement, and for all kinds of scientific reasons. Do you think that we have learnings already that we can somehow translate from the cities into faster action, whether it be in terms of carbon dioxide, but also now, of course, a lot of people are talking about methane and other super pollutants. Is there something we can learn from what we know already?
Absolutely, there are plenty of best practices in cities that can be learned for other cities, but also perhaps in other areas. But it's important to understand that already over 1,000 cities and some national jurisdictions have net zero emission goals around mid-century. Some of these cities, clearly in the more developed areas, have actually earlier net zero emission goals. So they are already doing a lot, and a lot of action is taking place, and we definitely can learn a lot from them. We can also learn very much from different ways of, for example, urbanization. So urbanizations patterns which encourage city design and urban form that favor local walking, cycling, so non-motorized transportation, which are not only much more less greenhouse gas emissions intensive, but also are more inclusive socially, because you can easier access jobs, you can easier access healthcare, other opportunities. You're not locked into potentially having to own a car or drive a car or have access to more expensive forms of transportation. So in many, many different ways, how different cities are showing the way, because as we mentioned, cities are innovating because they are smaller, it's easier for them to innovate. They are innovating in different solution spaces, and there is a lot of examples that we can learn from these.
So I suppose, hopefully, when this report is done, we're going to actually see a stronger focus on the cities because of the potential benefits society can get and the world from action there, and also for the cities themselves, because they often struggle to find the finance to actually meet their climate plans themselves. Could this also be a help and a stimulation, in a sense, for more investment being focused on the urban networks?
Absolutely, that's a really important point, because typically climate finance is talking about mostly just energy forms and mostly the supply side. Nevertheless, our reports showed that, for example, the sixth assessment report showed that we could reduce 40 to 70% of emissions through demand side action. So focusing also on why we need the energy, what we need the energy and materials for. And cities are exactly the entry points to make those changes happen. So if we also consider directing finances to cities and the demand side, where people and families are actually living, where businesses are working, then we often get more we get solutions which also result in more benefits for cities and businesses and families. So I hope that the financing structures in the end are going to allocate more and more of these resources to cities where not only the majority of our population lives, but also where majority of the GDP is being produced, as mentioned, and also where a lot of the fast action is taking place. So that's where we can achieve with this financing fast results. Because as you said, it is important that often cities are struggling to find the financing. So financing can go a long way through actions in cities.
Good. Well, I think we need to wrap up there. Thank you very much indeed, Dana, for being with us. We wish you best of luck with this report, and we hope that the governments internalise it and, like all IPCC reports, act on it. Maybe now we're 5 years away from 2030 with even more urgency than perhaps they've been doing in the past.